This is Unit 2, Lesson 10. So these first 4 slides, you can go ahead and pause and do these first four slides. Just pause right now. Go ahead and do them, and then come back. Okay, so let's check your first 4 slides. These are some warm-up slides. It says, which pair of triangles is congruent by side, angle, side? Remember, whenever we're looking at these triangle congruence theorems, these have to be in order. The side has to touch the angle, which has to touch the other side. So number 1, we have one side and one angle, so obviously can't be that. Number 2, we have a side and an angle, and this one is the same between both of them, so that could be my second side. This third one, so this is side, angle, side. This is nothing. This one is angle, side, angle. And this one is side, 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 because anytime you have the same side shared between both, then we can use that one. So the correct answer for this one, they wanted side, angle, side. That's going to be number 3. So if you got that one, you were correct. Okay, this next one said which pair of, same thing, which pair of angles is congruent. And then this time they want to know if it's congruent by the angle, side, angle. So we already looked at all of them on the last one, right? And we said that angle, side, angle. And actually, okay, so this first one is angle, side, and then this is what we didn't do in the last one. These two are vertical angles, so we know that those are congruent. So this first one, we have angle, side, angle on one and angle, side, angle on the other. So that one is correct. Number 2, even though there's a side marked here, notice it's not in between the angles. So for this one to have worked, this side would have had to be over here, the congruent side. So this is going to be number 1. Go ahead and check your work. And let's go to the next one. This one is angle, angle, side. They're asking us angle, angle, side. So let's look at them again. We can just kind of look at it quickly and see that this angle here, angle, and side, that works. Angle, angle, side. So that is number 2. And then I think there's one more. Which one is side, angle, side? Side, angle, side. So side, angle, side, we're going to look for, and the angle has to be in between the two sides. So this one, number 3, we have a side, then an angle, then a side. So that is number 3 correct there. Okay, let's go on to number 5. Okay, so this slide is just telling us that the objectives, we're going to be working on all 3 of these today: side, 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 angle, angle, and side, angle, side. All right, so we have a card sort match here, and if you want to go ahead and pause right now, you can pause, and then you can do these yourself. So pause, and when you come back, you can check them. Okay, so these are the correct answers for the card sort. So you can check your answers. These two are both side, angle, side. So for this one, it tells us JW, segment JW, is the perpendicular bisector of segment FH. So we know those are all right angles. FY, which is this interior segment, is congruent to segment HY. And JY, which is this segment, is congruent to WY, which is this segment. So as you can see, we have a side, an angle, and a side, an angle, and a side. So we can tell that these are congruent. For this next one, it says OR is perpendicular bisector of PQ. So we can see that. It bisects there. PS is going to be congruent to QS. So we have our right angles there. So we know that these two sides are congruent. We know that this angle here is congruent. And then we can tell that this side, since it's the same side, um, it's the same as itself, the both triangles share the side, that we can use also that side. So we have side, angle, side. This figure, it tells us KM is perpendicular bisector of NL, or it's perpendicular to NL, and we know that since LK is the same length as LM, then KN and NM or MN must be also congruent. So we have side, side, and then the middle side, we can count that as another side. This bottom one here, angle, side, angle. So we can see that these sides are congruent. This is very small. Oh, there we go. So DC is parallel to BA. It's telling me DC is parallel to BA, and AD is parallel to CB. So since we have two sets of parallel lines and a transversal that goes between them, we can determine that these angles, the alternate interior angles, are congruent. And we can do that with both sets of parallel lines. And then our middle line segment here, AC, of course, is reflective. So we can use that to be using the reflective property is congruent to itself. And that will give us our angle, side, angle. We're going to go over these in more detail. So if you're confused by them, don't worry. Okay, here's another card sort slide. So go ahead and do the same thing. Pause, see if you can figure them out, and then come back and we will discuss it. Okay, this is the answer key to the second set of slides here. So we're just trying to match slides with these statements. So if we look over here on the left, the first statement says, in a parallelogram, opposite sides are congruent. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. So if we look at this parallelogram, opposite sides are congruent. This is a parallelogram. We know that because these two opposite sides are congruent to these two opposite sides. Parallel sides. And if we know that they're both parallel, both sets of sides are parallel, then it has to be a parallelogram. Therefore, opposite sides are congruent. All right, let's look at this next statement. It says a quadrilateral with perpendicular diagonals that bisect each other is an equilateral. So here we have a quadrilateral. These perpendicular bisectors both intersect each other. Therefore, it's an equilateral quadrilateral. Equilateral quadrilateral, that's hard to say. Okay, this next one. If a diagonal of one of the quadrilaterals is perpendicular bisector of the other, then two pairs of adjacent sides are congruent. So that's what's happening here in this one. And you can see these top two are congruent to each other, and these bottom two are congruent to each other. And then we have one more here. It says opposite angles in an equilateral quadrilateral are congruent. So this one, we see how it's a quadrilateral, equilateral quadrilateral, which I know is hard to say, which is just like this one over here, right? So we can see how it's kind of smushed, but these opposite angles are going to be congruent. So I and B will be congruent, and Z and A will be congruent. Okay, so if you were confused by some of those card sorts, that's okay. We're going to continue. This is slide 8, and we're going to talk about the triangle congruence method. So this is all of them together. So we have, these are all of the triangle congruence methods put together. So here we have side, angle, side. Side, angle, side. Remember, the angle has to be in between the two sides. Side, side, side. That's all three sides. Hypotenuse leg, we haven't talked a lot about, but this can only work if you have a right triangle. If it's not a right triangle, you can't do hypotenuse leg. So as you can see, this is an angle and then two sides, but you cannot do an angle and two sides. And the reason why the way to help you remember that is it spells a bad word if you do angle, side, side. So we don't use that word, but if it's a right angle, we can do hypotenuse leg. We know the hypotenuse is opposite the right angle, and then one of the legs has to be congruent to the leg of the corresponding leg of the other triangle. Then we have angle, side, angle. In this one, the side has to be in between the angles. And then we have angle, angle, side. So in this one, the side is not between the two angles. It's just on the outside. All right, here's some tips and tricks. You can read this yourself. Some tips and tricks for completing and writing proofs. Go ahead and pause the video if you want to read it. All right, so all of these next few slides, I want you to go ahead and pause. You're going to complete all of these mark the diagram slides. See if you can do it on your own, and then you're going to pause and come back. Okay, this first one says, use the sketch tool to mark the picture with the given information and any bolos that be on the lookout for. And then choose what postulate proves the triangle is congruent. So we'll just mark this up here. We have QX is congruent to SX. So these two are congruent. And then angle Q is congruent to angle S. And then we have to think, okay, well, what else do we know is congruent? And in this case, we have vertical angles, right? So those have to be congruent. So if we just look and see what we have here, we have angle, then a side, then an angle. Angle, side, angle. So that's what we choose, angle, side, angle. All right, the next one. And again, if you didn't pause, go ahead and pause and do these on your own first. This one says X is the midpoint of QS, which means that these two are congruent. And X is also the midpoint of RP, which means that these two are congruent. And then again, we know that vertical angles are congruent. So now if we look and see what we have a side, then an angle, then a side. Same thing over here. So that's SAS, side, angle, side. So we'll just click that one and it should tell you if you're correct. All right, this next one says, use the sketch tool to mark the picture with the given information. Same thing, M is the midpoint of GL, so we can go ahead and say that these two are congruent. And GK is congruent to LK, so we can say that these two are congruent. And then what else do we know? Well, we know that any segment is congruent to itself, so that's our third side, so we're going to choose side, side, side. Next one says QR bisects angle PQS. That tells us that these two are congruent. And PQ is congruent to SQ. These two are congruent. And then what is the third thing we know? Reflexive property. QR is congruent to itself. So we have another side, side, side. Okay, on this next slide, they want us to put these in order. So go ahead and pause again so that you can figure these out, and then we'll do it together. Okay, let's check your work. So it says prove ABC is congruent to DCB. And this diagram shows a two-column proof, and we're going to try to put these in order based on the statements they already gave us. So they said C is the midpoint of NB. What is the reasoning for that? Well, we know at the beginning, we always are going to have the given as our reasoning, right? So that's going to be the first given, and then the second one, C is the midpoint of MA, is the second given. So they helped us out by giving us a 1 and 2 since we had two givens. The next thing says NC is congruent to BC. So why would NC right here be congruent to BC? Well, we know we just said that it's a midpoint. We just said C is a midpoint of BC, right? Or of NB. So because of that, that's how we can say they're congruent. So since we're talking about the midpoint, the previous thing tells us the reason for the next one. So we know that that is the definition of a midpoint. Same thing with MC congruent to AC. We know we're using number 2 to figure that out. That's a midpoint. So this is the second definition of a midpoint. Then we've got number 5 says angle NCM. NCM is congruent to BCA. Now they didn't tell us anything about these two angles, but if we look here, you can see that these are vertical angles. So that is going to be our reason. It's already in the right place here for number 5. And then, since we know, we just said we have to look and see what we have proven, right? And we've proven so far two sides and an angle, and the angle is in between the two sides. So that's how we know we can use side, angle, side. And you can click that to correct it, to show if it's correct, and it'll show you if it's correct. All right. Okay, so this next one, again, I want you to pause and try it yourself first. And we can check it. All right, so you've already done this one on your own. Let's see if we can figure it out. This time they give us the reasons. We have to figure out the statements. So what did they give us? Well, it's not written up here what they gave us, but it's drawn on here what they gave us, right? So what is given? They gave us that WX is congruent to YZ, right? They also gave us, oh no, sorry, those are parallel. They gave us the WX is parallel to ZY, and then the red indicates that these two are parallel XY and WZ. And then you can also see that these little hash marks tell us that XY is congruent to ZY. So that is going to be my given up here. There's actually more given information than they told us, but that's okay. So we're going to leave this one up here. The next one says reflexive property. Well, we know reflexive property is always something equal to itself. So in this case, it's going to be this line in the middle, WY. So YW is congruent to, or WY is congruent to YW. That's the same line. So we're going to put that in our second spot. Then number 3 says alternate interior angles are congruent. So if we look, since we know we have two lines cut by a transversal, that could be these two angles, and it also could be these two angles. So we just have to see what angles are available. And here they show us angle XYW and angle ZWY. So that's these purple ones. Oops, someone read. These purple ones are the ones that they give us. And then we can say the last step, of course, is triangles are congruent to each other by side, angle, side, because that's what we have, a side with two sides with an angle in between. All right, that's it. Go ahead and work on the practice problems, and then you can take your Canvas quiz.